All right, I have finished another full book series in the world of Malazan because I have finished the final book in the novels of the Malazan Empire, Assail by Ian C. Esslemont. This is a review. Let's get going. Assail by Ian C. Esslemont is the sixth and final book in the novels of the Malazan Empire series. It's very much a companion book, or at least it feels a companion book, to Blood and Bone, which was the fifth book in the series. And if you see my review of that book, one that I didn't really enjoy that much, so I was a bit trepidatious coming into this book because I wanted to finish the series well and be excited about it. Even though Assail is similar to Blood and Bone in many ways, I think it is different in some very important ways, and I enjoyed this book. It was not like Blood and Bone, which I found quite disappointing and maybe even a little bit exhausting at points. I think this is a fascinating tale, and particularly one storyline in general I think really infuses a lot of energy into this book that Blood and Bone did not. I'm going to save a lot of my thoughts on the novels of the Malazan Empire series generally for another video I'm going to make. I think I'm going to do a tier ranking video to talk about each one of them sort of in context of the larger series and in the context of the Book of the Fallen. Suffice to say that I really do think it's an inconsistent series. I really enjoyed some works and others I found difficult to get through. This was, of the first variety, I think a good addition to the Malazan world. So what is Assail actually about? Well, like the name would imply, it's about the subcontinent of Assail. And similar to Jakuraku in Blood and Bone, this is an island that is very unfriendly to those who are not people who have lived on it for a long time. There's a lot of mysteries, a lot of, like, the land itself seems to be alive with malice at certain points. There's like this really beautiful, I think it's called the Dread Sea, or a sea where boats just go missing. And because of that, it doesn't have a lot of contact with the outside world. In fact, we've heard very little from Assail generally in the Malazan books. But Assail is going to be a convergence of a lot of different threads that have been going on in the novels of the Malazan Empire. The first one, and maybe like the most prominent thread now that I've finished all of them, is Kyle's storyline, who's now called Whiteblade. We've known, I think since Return of the Crimson Guard, that he's from this continent of Assail, but we don't really know the backstory or why he is exactly here, at least I don't remember that. And so this is him sort of trying to find meaning for the quest that he's gone through all of these books in his time in the Return of the Crimson Guard and elsewhere. We have the Crimson Guard itself trying to figure out the mystery of like what they actually are, what the vow means, and what they are going to be, especially with the mysterious appearance and sort of caginess of Kaz. And a third sort of larger thread that's through all Malazan books is the Talan Imas war against the Jagat. And we learn very early on, in fact, I think it's the prologue, that there is a mysterious Jagat-like race that is on this continent that is drawing the Talan Imas to it. And the reason that they are drawn now, not hundreds of thousands of years ago, is because the weakening of Vomtos Falak. So there's like a sensing of what this actually might be, who this race might be, and it might reignite the Jagat Wars, which is, of course, a massive bloodbath. So those are three things kind of converging on the continent of Assail at the same time. And then there are two maybe more what we think are more localized events, such as this supposed gold rush happening that is bringing foreigners for the first time in numbers to Assail, and this tension up in the high mountain holds that we see through a young warrior's eyes. All of that, like any good Malazan book, is going to converge into a series of very big and small confrontations. I would say right off the bat that I think this is my favorite book in the series since Stone Wielder. I think it is very strong, and there is a lot of exciting action that is happening in this book. I'll talk about it in the spoiler section, but suffice to say, for me, this is still a long recommendation because I do feel that certain characters and plots do drag down the momentum that other plots do have. And you can probably guess that from how I described the plot a little bit earlier, but I'll tell you explicitly in the spoiler section below. But I wanted you guys to let you know where my overall rating was. And now let's just get to the more exciting part, which is the spoiler discussion of the book itself. So just like Steven Erikson does in the twin books of Dust of Dreams and Crippled God at the end of the Book of the Fallen, I think Esslemont is wanting to hammer down this overall theme of sort of revenge anger, battle, war, wanting to dominate, these decisions that sentient beings continue to make are ultimately destructive, even sometimes if they're justified, and they perpetuate this cycle of destruction among each other and horrors and sadness, and it just perpetuates it. And the way to get by that is a radical understanding of another person's perspective, radical self-sacrifice, while also sort of radical empowerment at the same time. And I think Esslemont is trying to hammer those themes here in this book as well. I think it's much more successful here than in Blood and Bone, although I think he's also trying that same theme there. So let's talk more in depth about the 4 kind of main plots as I see them that are interesting, that I find fascinating. The first one, of course, is Kyle's journey as Whiteblade, and Malazan has these from time to time. Of course, Greymane in Stonewielder. In the Book of the Fallen, there's all kinds. There's Akarium, there's Karsa, Nimander, like these powerful beings who are just wandering without purpose and trying to find out what they should do with their power. And Kyle has now kind of fallen into this category after embracing his power at the end of Stonewielder and really being touched by what Greymane did, but also not feeling that that was exactly his fight, where he was sort of making his mark as this now powerful being. And that's why he's returning to the land that he has come from. I find his story very, very interesting. And especially with the addition of some secondary characters that he meets along the way, particularly, I think, Fisher and, I just call him Reborn Animandrake, but what's his, Jethys, as well as the woman from North Genabacus, the battle maiden that he meets. I mean, he just has a lot of interesting character growth as he's sort of wandering this continent that I find fascinating. The Crimson Guard storyline is very complicated to me because I love all those characters. I'm very drawn to Shimmer in particular. I also really like Blues. A Cowl, I think, is so fascinating. Like, I want to really be invested in the Crimson Guard, but I keep getting disappointed by that storyline. That was a big part of my frustration with Blood and Bone. And this storyline, the Crimson Guard, is coming to this land to find out the truth about their vow, and hopefully to find the 4th company of the Crimson Guard, which has been missing for a long time, and looking for that commander or brother, which is Cal Bryn, I think his name is. And I like how this starts out, because it's basically Shimmer being like, fine, Kaz, if you're not going to be a leader, I will be a leader. We are going to go find this out. And she is very particularly not being Skinner when she does this, but is also, again, usurping the leadership of someone who should have leadership. And I'm still very frustrated by Kaz, even with the reveals at the end of this book. His reticence to talk to his brothers and sisters in the Crimson Guard about the reality of their vow, I just don't think makes sense. And I find him a very uninspiring character. And I don't just mean as a leader, I mean as a reader. It just seems kind of weak, and I think that weakens the whole Crimson Guard storyline. But anyway, they're coming to Assail to try to learn more about their vow, because they have mysteriously heard that they have to find this answer in Assail. The Crimson Guard are eventually joined by this sort of weird brotherhood of like Letheri merchants and some mercenary groups. There's the Blue Shield, which is like a religious organization, and just some like random pirates. And that is the part of the book that really, like, to be quite frank, I don't really find that interesting. And a lot of page count, I think, could have been minimized by just like simplifying that journey. There's some cool stuff. As I said, I liked kind of the Sea of Dread and some of the sort of exciting pop-up sort of one-off adventures, but there were too many that slowed the pace down of the work overall. And again, I found not completely satisfying as a reader. And by far the weakest of these plots that I'm talking about here. The third one is very exciting because Silver Fox is back from Book of the Fallen, and the reveal of her as this like ghost god on the coast was like wonderful. And her and Pran Chol, is that his name? Yeah. Pran Chol still figuring out how to achieve what they want to achieve, which is to end the Jagged War and to give some semblance of peace to all Talan Amas. But this complication that one of the reasons that they feel cursed is that there's no longer any Jagged that is attainable for them to slay. And so like their vow now is meaningless. But because of the weakening of Umtas Falak, now there is this whole continent of people who have some Jagged blood within them. And so this other clan, the Assail, are still hell-bent on destroying all semblance of Jagged blood. And so they start committing basically genocide on this continent or subcontinent, and Silver Fox is racing to try to stop them from doing that and stopping this larger bloodshed. And then 4, and I think this is really the juice of this book, and that is the Orman storyline up in the mountains in the holds, which is just like a classic Viking saga, harkening back to Beowulf, other epics, that is just so much fun, has so much momentum, has so much feeling and passion, and in such a way that it sometimes badly reflects on some of the other storylines. Specifically, like, I just wanted to get back to the Orman storyline, especially when I was in some of those like one-off adventures with like the gang around the Crimson Guard, that just did not work well for me, and had some remnants of Blood and Bone, where I had some storylines that I really wanted more of, and other storylines that were just like walking through a jungle and jungles being bad. Sorry, I shouldn't talk about Blood and Bone so much. I'm talking about Assail. Orman, Viking saga, that there are great halls up in these mountains. It is cold. There are battles with axes and spears and this mythical weapon that is his by right that he has to take from his uncle and then try to unite with a new family. And this family is trying to defend their holds against other families while also like battling the elements and some mysterious forces up in the larger mountains and the new people from the south who are coming because of the gold rush. Like, all of that is just like fascinating. Love it. And all of these 4 storylines are layered on that same theme of like this generational like desire to conquer or survive or preserve your way of life, whatever you want to say it, that has led people to violence and great acts of violence, whether that is Kyle, whether that is the Crimson Guard, whether that is the Talan and Mas, certainly over like hundreds of thousands of years, or just much more locally in Orman and his family defending against other families who are the same people. It is a really wonderful sort of symphony of theme through those 4, but I do think the Orman one is by far the best from beginning to end. Feeling that all of this anger and animosity doesn't have to exist like it is. I'm forgetting the name of when he learns he has his half-brother. I'm forgetting the name of the half-brother, and the half-brother is killed by another member of like the same people but a different family in the hold because there's been like generational anger, and he has to go and kill them, but then feels like how empty it is to kill these other folks instead of defending them from the larger things that are happening, both the Talan and Mas, also the Southerners, which are coming up, or these foreigners, but also the Talan and Mas. Like, that unity is much better than this constant fracturing violence. Orman's is by far my favorite part of this book, even his ending of like, I'm just going to rebuild up here and try to build a better society here in the holds in my way of life, I think is honestly even more powerful than sort of the Forquil Assail scene at the end, which I'll get to in a minute. Actually, not in a minute. Let's just get there right now. Let's talk about the ending, because the ending is a pretty cool convergence of stuff, which is basically like this faux meeting of the 4 founding races again, except pseudo Anamander Rake Jeththys, I always forget, Jeththys, I think his name, stands in for the Tistandi, who are now standing in for the K'chain Shamal, because obviously they've been mostly, in this world at least, done away with, destroyed. And this basically new pact of peace between the 4 founding races, which is more powerful now because Silver Fox is able to stop the clan from destroying anyone with the Jagged, and understanding that they have a future now through Silver Fox. The Crimson Guard are sort of accepted as a new clan of the Talan and Mas because their vow is somehow tied to the vow of Talan. So that's interesting, I guess, lore. Again, I don't know why Kaz just like didn't tell them that. Like, yes, this is a pretty big shock, but also, I don't know, deal with it together. You don't have to go to like this high mountain and visit a Forquil Assail. I think it was interesting that Forquil Assail was up there in this hard sense of justice, but like it wasn't any sort of interesting examination of like hard justice that we saw again in Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God. As I already said, I really like Orman's ending. I think that was very powerful. Jeththys as Anamander Rake reborn and getting this sword of bone like made out of his own arm. Like, that's a very interesting act, and that he and Kyle and Fisher are going to go off wherever they're going to go. Like, I'm curious if that's going to come up in another series. Maybe it has already and I haven't read it yet in like Paths to Ascendancy. I don't know. So all that to say is, I think you're getting from this that I enjoyed this book, but it didn't knock me out. And that is sort of my thoughts of the whole series of the novels of the Malazan Empire. Really fascinating as a lover of the Book of the Fallen and the world generally. I found some great stuff. I'm glad I read them. I don't know if I will return to any of them. If I was going to read like Assail again, I might just read it as a standalone story of Orman, to be frank. Those are my thoughts on Assail. I mean, I I saw enough of E.N.C. Esslemont in these books to want to get to the Path to Ascendancy series, which I have heard from multiple people is the best work that E.N.C. Esslemont has done. And so I'm excited to do that. I'm going to take a little bit of break, but I'm glad to have finished this series. Let me know what you think of Assail and maybe the whole series in the comments below. As always, first in, last out.